Welcome to the Pro to Pro podcast, where we explore the stories and strategies of successful entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Keith Hanenian, and in each episode, I'll be sitting down with a different guest to learn about their journey, their challenges, and their insights into building a successful business. As a lawyer who works with industry leaders, I've seen firsthand the passion and drive that it takes to turn an idea into a thriving enterprise. And in this podcast, I want to share those stories with you, our viewers and listeners. Whether you're an inspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or just someone who loves a good success story, you'll find something to inspire and inform you in each episode. So sit back, relax, and join us as we dive into the world of entrepreneurship and discover the insights that can help you succeed in your own business. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Pro to Pro. I'm Keith Hanenian. I'm here with my guest, Zoe Gazola. Hi, Zoe. How are you?
I'm
Welcome.
excited. Thank you.
I'm so glad you came. You came over from Miami.
Sure did.
Yeah. How was the trip? It was a good trip for you?
Like a 45-minute flight.
Yeah.
Out.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's nice. That's nice. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yes, I'm excited.
I just started this podcast. As you know, you're like the fourth or fifth guest that we've had on. And prior to starting the podcast and talking with you, you have experiences that I really want you to share with our audience. And kind of the way I like to segue into some of the discussions. Obviously, you're born in America, but your family is from Mexico originally, right? So, you have this successful business. You have viable aesthetic practices in two different states. You got your doctorate as a nurse practitioner. You're going back now to get a
I started
degree.
school for mental health.
So you're obviously a go-getter to the nth degree. So for our viewers and our listeners, I'd like to kind of peel the onion and get into what created such driving force for you, as a youngster that got you to the place where you are now. Tell me a little bit about your family and how you developed growing up.
So both of my parents are from Mexico and my mom was an illegal immigrant. I'm first generation American. I was born here in the US, and growing up, I've always been in survival mode. I grew up from very humble beginnings. We really didn't have a lot. And so I think that drive that I have is just mainly from a sense of I have to do something to get out of my situation. My parents always push me to, hey, like, we're here in America. You got to do something. You have to do something. And it was mainly a survival instinct. And I didn't really have a choice not to go far where I am now, because my parents kind of instilled something in me that was like, you have to go all the way to the top or like nothing at all. It was like, you get it all or nothing.
So both your mom and your dad were undocumented?
My mom.
Okay.
Yeah. My dad had gotten his documents, but he's also an immigrant from Mexico.
Okay.
But my mom was undocumented.
Okay. Yeah. And then where were you raised? What area were you raised?
Border town, El Paso, Texas.
Oh, wow. So you were right on the border.
I was on the border. Yeah. My mom literally crossed from Juarez, literally just crossed. And
how old was she when she came over?
14 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. My mom was 14 and then she had me at 15. Yeah.
So, oh, wow. So she had you so young.
She did.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother that's younger. We're 3 years apart. And then I have a sister that's 10 years younger than me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you say that you kind of developed this moxie through watching your mom, was there an innate fear while you were growing up with regard to her being undocumented that you were aware of?
Yeah. I mean, most of my family was undocumented there in El Paso, Texas. So my family just lived in this constant like fear of like, be quiet, like don't be seen type thing because of immigration stuff. And so, it was just one of those like constant fears that, we had until my mom was able to get her citizenship.
And how long was that before she got it?
So my parents got married. And I'm not really sure when she got her citizenship, but it took my mom like almost 30 years in the country for her to become a U.S.
So
citizen.
You were already an adult by the time she got it.
Yeah.
So all through grade school, high school, she was undocumented.
Yes.
And you dealt with that fear?
Yep.
Was there any instances where there was actual legitimate circumstances where you were worried that she may get deported or something?
There wasn't, because honestly, at that time, back in the day, like El Paso is like a huge city of just all Mexican immigrants, really.
Mm-hmm.
So we blended in, you know, but, you know, it's just, I guess, hearing through it, you know, like my family and friends and other people that were undocumented, it was just like the constant talk there. So it just, you know, it fried in my brain.
Were you ever subject to any type of prejudice or circumstances because of that, as far as your parents are concerned?
Definitely. We have dealt with a lot of like racial profiling, stereotypes, things that my parents and I have gone through that I haven't talked about. That now that you just said it, it kind of brings me back to a few.
I could only
things.
imagine some of the things. I mean, how were you able to go through some of those challenges? I mean, like, at what age did it start that you actually were aware that you were getting exposed to such negative behavior?
You know, I think like between like 10 and 12 is when I really started to notice some more of that, like, you know, anti-immigration type hate, you know, people calling us like, you know, horrible names, and especially, you know, being immigrants from Mexico, they're used like really horrible derogatory terms towards my parents and myself too. So it was tough.
So I guess that in part helped you develop that thick skin.
Yeah.
And you said that, you know, formative years, you obviously are outspoken. We talk a little bit about, and we'll get into it, about the challenges that you faced with social media and the platforms and things along those lines. But give me an idea of your progression career-wise. I mean, you're obviously successful in what you're doing, but, you know, you develop a moxie. How about the work ethic? Where did the work ethic come from?
I mean, my parents worked. They just worked in everything and anything to get us through. And so my dad was always very firm on like job longevity and loyalty and stuff like that. So I think that's where I get that.
Did he maintain the same job for
my dad always maintained like the same job for many years. He was very loyal to the job. You know, he was very proud of the job. And so I think that's where I got that from.
When did you start working? Do you remember when you first started to work?
I was 15.
And what did you do?
I know I worked at Target. And then I also worked at a car dealership too.
You were selling cars?
I was not selling cars, no, but I did admin stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did admin stuff, yeah.
How were your high school years? Did you have fond memories of high school?
No, unfortunately, no. I was picked on a lot in school. I was a very nerdy kid. I had braces and, you know, I was like a skinny mini little kid. I wasn't the popular kid at all. I was in band, and I did play some sports, but I was never like the popular girl. So I had a really hard time in high school because of the picking, mainly because of like I had braces, and like I said, I was just like a really nerdy, scrawny little girl. So high school, I hated high school. So when I was when I got into high school, I opted to get into all of these like advanced courses so that I can finish and graduate high school sooner.
And
so I was able, so I graduated high school in 2 years.
2 years you graduated high school?
Yeah.
So you obviously have the intellect.
Yeah, I did everything. I didn't care. Like instead of taking summer and winter break, I took classes so that I can just graduate because I was just so desperate to get out of that environment.
It was that bad?
Yeah, it was really toxic. Yeah.
Was it more girls versus boys? Was it more girl? Because
it was more girls.
Mean
girls. Yeah, it was mean girls.
It's ironic you're in mean girl syndrome now in aesthetics too, which we can talk about.
Yeah, no, it was mainly girls that picked on me. And so I hated it. And so back then, you know, I was a very shy kid. I was very scared to be outspoken. And it was because of all the adversities, you know, growing up.
Sure.
And then, you know, having family members that were illegal immigrants and then them instilling that like, oh, you know, be quiet, hush, like don't be seen. And then getting to middle school and high school, I was picked on a lot. So I would try to just disappear and not be in anyone's, you know, view and anyone's vision.
So you tried to fly under the radar.
Yeah, I tried. Yep, I tried. And then I think there was just, I can't really pinpoint the exact moment, but I just had a breakthrough after high school and I was like, I'm done with this. And this is when I just I started just to speak out a little bit more. And then my voice got louder and louder and louder. And that's how that got.
When you said you had this breakthrough, so what was it in college? You think that it came about?
I can't pinpoint the exact, I think I just got tired of being under the radar, and I got tired of hiding, and I got tired of, people always like shutting me off.
So it was like a switch for you?
It was just a switch. Yeah, it was just a switch. And I think that, I think social media actually helped me.
So what year would this have been? Give us a frame time-wise for us after high school.
I'm going to say like 2004, 2005. This is when I started to break out of my shell. I went to college. And when I was in college,
going to school?
I went to school in Arizona,
Texas?
in Phoenix.
Oh, in Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My family moved out of Texas. We moved to Arizona. So I went to college there. Yep. I did all of my college there. And so I think once I was able to move into a different environment and then be independent because I was working full time and I was putting myself through school, that gave me the confidence to be a little bit more outspoken because I had to figure things out on my own. My parents didn't have a manual. My parents didn't even know. My mom doesn't even speak English. So I had to figure out everything on myself, by myself. So I think that is what created the confidence for me to like start to be a little bit more outspoken because I needed to defend myself. My parents couldn't defend me. Nobody could defend me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you move out of your family's house when you were in Arizona going to school, or did you live with your parents?
I lived with my parents. Okay. Yeah. My family was they are very traditional. So my dad was always like, you're never leaving the house until you get married. I was like, yeah, right.
That's interesting. So did you end up becoming kind of like the spokesperson on behalf of your family because you became this outspoken individual,
actually.
like a champion?
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you one of the first to go to college?
So I'm the first to go to college. I'm the first college graduate. And yeah, anytime that there's anything like that, I'm usually like the moderator now.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
And what did you major in college? What was your
I
focus?
just did nursing. I went straight into, I went to the community college. I did all my prereqs for nursing, and then I went straight for my BSN. I graduated from Grand Canyon University, which is a top 4 nursing school in the nation. So it was a private Christian university in Arizona.
Okay.
Very good school. And then after that, I got a job in the ICU. So I was working ICU in Phoenix at a hospital. And then after that, I ditched and moved to California. And so I was doing travel nursing as an ICU nurse and in various hospitals in Southern California. And then after that, I got 3 years experience of ICU. And then I went back to school to Northern Arizona University, got my master's there in primary care. And then here I am. And then I got my doctorate in,
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So you have, at least from my perspective, and we see this, and we'll obviously talk about your clinic and what you do in the real world, but you obviously have medical experience that you can play on and use practically for purposes of dealing with patients now, currently, which I find very important, but it seems rarer in that there's a medical clinic popping up everywhere, every place, and newly mint, nurses
right.
or mid-levels, PAs, whatever you want to call it, are opening up these practices where they don't necessarily have their formative years in development of dealing with patient care. It is a medical industry, but you obviously developed that. Tell me a little bit about how the interest and passion developed for aesthetics.
So when I was 17, when I graduated high school, I ended up going to trade school and I did a program as a medical assistant. And it was like a quick 6-month medical assistant program. So when I did that, I just sent out a bunch of resumes. And like one of the first people that had reached out to me was a plastic surgeon. And so that's when I became a medical assistant for a plastic surgeon.
Oh.
And that's how that started. I was not interested at all in plastics or derm or anything like that. My whole passion was actually the ICU. I wanted to work in burn and shock trauma. And so I never really wanted to do any of that. But the doctor that I used to work for was very, very flexible with my school schedule. So even after I graduated, they were very flexible with like with school, with training, with all kinds of stuff. So then that's when I trained to do fillers and Botox. And this is like back 16 years ago, maybe or longer.
So you started a long time ago then. You got exposed to it early on.
Yeah. So in aesthetics, I actually started at 17 because I was a medical assistant in plastic surgery.
Wow.
For a plastic surgeon. Yeah. And then that's just kind of how it stuck. And so when I got my BSN, I immediately went into the ICU, but I was still working 1 day a week injecting, because the doctor was like, oh, please stay here injecting. And it was a fairly new thing. There was not a whole bunch of injectors. I think in Arizona, there was like maybe 4 injectors at that other time.
And for the most part, it was strictly Botox, right? Back in the day?
It was mainly Botox. And then there was like a collagen filler back then, which I never injected that collagen, but Radius had just came out on the market when I started. And then back then, it wasn't Galderma. It was Medicis, I think, with Restylane Lift used to be called Pearl.
Wow.
And it came in a 2 ml syringe.
Oh my God.
So we were just like, it was just crazy the things that how we used to inject.
Yeah.
Now back then, like 16 years ago, as compared to now, everything that we've learned regarding safety. So now I look back, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we used to do this. But yeah, so I've actually been in aesthetics for a very, very long time prior to even me becoming an RN.
So bring us to a point in your career where you made a decision that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, that you essentially wanted to run your own business, or did you always want to run your own business?
I did not want to run my own business. That didn't come across my mind at all. My passion was working in the ICU. I really loved working in shock trauma and burn ICU. But when I was out in California, I stayed there for a little bit. I kind of wanted to move all around, and the agency that I was signed up with called me and said, hey, we have an incredible opportunity for you to go to Cornell in New York City. Do you want to go? And they want you in the burn ICU. I was like, well, I've never been to New York City. And I was petrified because, you hear all these like scary things about New York City. I was like, oh, well, I'll try it. They're like, look, please go. The sign-on bonus is like incredible. And back then at that time, it was a big chunk of money.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Let me go. If I don't like it, it's only 3 months and I can just go. And so I ended up getting a one-way flight to New York and I never left. And so when I got to New York, I was working at Cornell in the burn ICU as a travel nurse, and I ended up staying there for years, actually. And then
what year was that you went?
This is in 2010.
Okay.
And this is in 2010. And then I just kind of kept renewing my contract over and over. And then I just became like an in-house traveler at Columbia University at the hospital over there for New York Presbyterian. And I was there for like 6 years working in the ICU. And that in 2011 was when I opened up a small little office. And I met a facialist in New York through a friend of a friend. And she was like, hey, I have an extra room. You should inject here. If you can get a medical director, I know somebody who can be your medical director here, and you should start injecting again. And I was like, I never really thought of that. I was like, okay, well, let me see what happens.
So you really didn't have
I had no
intention.
No intention. I didn't care for that because I loved working in the ICU. I loved working the bedside. So that esthetician said, I'll tell you what, if you can inject my clients, I won't charge you for the room for 3 months. And, once after 3 months, if you're doing good, then I'll charge you $500 a month. That was my rent back then.
Oh my gosh.
So then,
where were you in New York?
It was on 23rd and 9th.
That's a nice
in
area.
Chelsea. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So I was in this tiny little room. So I started there, and she had connected me to a doctor that was my medical director at that time, because at that time I was still an RN. So he became my medical director, and then that's how it started. And I kid you not, like within 6 months, I was booked out solid for 3 days for like 2 months ahead. And I was like, this is so crazy. I ended up having to go PRN at the hospital to add more days injecting. And so it just kind of, that's how that started.
Let me back up a little bit. So for the people that may be listening or watching the podcast that are not familiar with the aesthetic industry, explain what a role a medical director would have as far as the necessity of that at that time for you.
So because I'm an RN, I couldn't practice independently.
Okay.
So I needed a medical doctor to oversee my charts, to order the medications, because a lot of people don't know this, but like Botox fillers and numbing cream, even numbing cream, all of that stuff. You have to have a medical license, prescriptive authorities to get these things, even medical supplies through like McKesson. You have to have prescriptive rights. So he served as that, as like a safety, my medical liaison.
And a mentor if need be.
And a mentor as well.
Right. Or something
a mentor
comes
as
up.
well. Yeah. And so that opened the doors for me, because from there I was able to, because I was signed up to all of these accounts through him, that's when I started to go to like more trainings and, open more.
So that opened up your experience to learn different procedures, protocols, through all these different manufacturers, right? Because I know they offer a lot of training.
Right. And I was injecting in Arizona also under the doctor. But like as soon as I moved to California, like I just dropped it because I didn't care for it at that time. And this is back in 2009. So this is in 2009. And then I injected for like a year. After that, I went to California for another year. And then I went to New York City. And then I opened up that little space.
So the New York was basically the catalyst for you with regard to your aesthetic and your development of your aesthetic practice. You obviously have a good bedside manner. You're a likable person. Patients love you. Back then, were you utilizing social media at all? Where was social media at that time?
Actually, Instagram had just came out, and actually, I was one of the first injectors to start posting my stuff, my before and afters on Instagram. So if you go into
what was the handle? So
it's always been the same handle, Injector Zoe. So if you go all the way down past the 3,000 posts that I have, you'll find old posts from 2011.
2011.
You'll find posts from 2011. I never changed my name. So my handle has been the same since 2011.
What made you post? What was the desire or instinct for you to post, to do that? Do you remember?
I have no idea. I really don't know. It was just something that I said, hey, you know what? Let me post this. I was like, let me just post it. Because for me, I saw it. I was like, oh, this is kind of art.
Yeah.
And at that time, like nobody was posting. Nobody knew anything.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting people like, oh, this is really nice. What did you do here? Oh, this is what I did. And at that time, I was injecting Allergan products because that was who I had the account with. So, oh, this is Juvederm and this is that. And so I started to get a little bit more into stuff like that and talking about skincare.
So there was engagement going on with you and these.
So that's when engagement.
People?
Yep. So that's when engagement started to happen. And as soon as within a few months of me posting on Instagram, that's when things just started to really blow up.
And you started to get booked out? Do you attribute your success in part to doing that?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Largely because one, I had the referrals from that esthetician. And then two, no one was posting anything at that time. And, it was 2011. Instagram had just came out.
Yeah.
And so nobody was posting that. Everyone was posting pictures of their dogs and flowers.
Facebook was more of a social
stuff
platform.
Like that. Yeah.
Were you savvy on the social side personally prior to doing this?
I think I was because, back then I grew up during the MySpace days.
Okay. So you had experience personally.
So I was there uploading my song, my page, and my backdrop. And so because I think because I had that experience, I was able to navigate like through Instagram. So when it came out, I was like, this is great.
So it wasn't intimidating, like for guys my age or people my age, it's a little more intimidating. Not my wife, but for people. So you kind of grew up in that environment to get to the point. So you're doing it on the side. You said 3 days a week you were doing it?
I was doing it 3 days a week, and then it just became 4, and then it just became a full-time thing. And I ended up dropping the hospital where I was only working back then. I don't know how it is now, but back then I had to, in order to stay like on staff there or like on their books, I had to work 4 shifts a month. So I was literally just working the bare minimum because I knew, I was busy and I was doing really well. But I had such a hard time letting go of the ICU because I really genuinely liked it.
Yeah.
But eventually I just stopped signing up for shifts. And then that was that.
And when you were injecting under Injector Zoe, did you set up the clinic at that time, or when did you set up the Indigo Clinic? Do you remember?
The Indigo Clinic, I didn't end up setting up until 2014 or 2015 when I went back to school and I did my FNP. And then
what's the FMP?
Family nurse practitioner.
Okay.
My master's.
It's your master's.
Yeah. So
okay.
when I did my master's, when I did that, that's when I officially incorporated.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how was it that you were booking all these people way back when under your name? Did you have a system what system did you utilize?
People would just call me.
So you're just
back then, people were texting me. Yeah, people were texting me.
So you handled your own calendar.
I handled my own calendar. Yep.
And how about billing? You handled your own billing and everything?
Yep, I handled all of that.
Wow.
Yep. I had a little square, and I had like a little it was like a generic LLC under my name, and that's how I was doing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now you were living on your own in New York?
I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you stay living on your own in New York?
I always have. I
never
had a roommate. I never lived with anybody.
So you did that all by yourself. So how long were you in New York?
Since 2010.
So you stayed in New York and because it's interesting, we'll get to it, but you made a decision to open up another clinic in Miami. Which I did
during the pandemic. I did.
Okay, so let's move to that. So you think it was predicated on what was going on in New York? Do you think?
Yeah, so we had like a brutal lockdown in New York City. We were cooped up in my apartment for 4 months, and they shut you down, right? You couldn't practice, couldn't work. And so it ended up affecting Vinny, my husband, a lot because he's an athlete. And so they shut down the gym and everything. And he was just like going down like a sad depression thing. And so it was making me anxious seeing him like this. So he's an immigrant from Brazil. And so he had even though he's traveled, he's never really been much out other than from Sao Paulo to Brazil. So I was like, you know what?
Well, shout out to Vinny too. What's his handle on? So he's busy too on Instagram.
Yes.
He's very popular. Right?
Yes.
It's Brazilian. He's a professional.
Yeah, he's a professional Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter.
Fighter.
Yeah. So I ended up making the decision to say, hey, let's go down to Florida. It's open. You can train there. And he knew of some friends that were training in the Miami area. He's like, let's go try it. I was like, you know what? I have patients that fly from Miami to New York City all the time to get injected. I think I'll be okay. And I winged it. And I just said, it's going to be okay.
What? So you just picked up and you kept the practice in New York.
I did. Yeah.
And you just opened up another practice.
Yep. I just opened up a new business here through the state of Florida, and I did all of that paperwork. It was fairly quick and easy. And I just opened up shop. And did you
start with renting space, or did you just buy it?
No, I rented space.
So you rented in the beginning and let it build up?
Yep, I rented space. And so I had a lot of my clients from New York City that have moved down here during the pandemic. And then you had all those digital nomads as well. So when I came here and I opened, I was just busy. Automatically. Yeah. Because everyone was down here in Florida. So for the last 2 years of the pandemic, it had been good because everyone was down here and Vinny was able to train.
Yeah.
And then from then I was just kind of going back and forth between New York and Miami. And with time, New York opened up a little bit more and more. And so here I ended up hiring my nurse practitioner, Heidi, who I trained. So she now is the primary injector for the office here. And then my primary injecting office is in New York City.
So you're basically seeing patients in both locations.
Correct.
How do you manage that?
It's easy. It's a 2.5-hour flight.
Okay.
And so, I have a home in Miami and I also have my apartment in Manhattan. So I have my stuff. So I literally just take my purse and fly out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Makes it easy.
So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned Vinny, and part of our discussion that we go over a little bit is how relationships can either break or make a career. And what I mean by that, I know from my perspective, my wife really helped elevate me in my career and is basically my biggest fan. Where were you in your career when you met Vinny?
I was at the peak of my career. I had just graduated with my doctorate. My New York City practice was doing phenomenal. So he met me at the peak.
He met you, all right. So he met you at a high.
Yeah, he
Uh,
met me at the high. Yeah.
okay. And how has it been since? Because obviously he's a professional. I know personally he travels all over the world.
Yeah.
How do you guys manage that relationship?
Because he's able to train pretty much anywhere, it makes it easy. So like when I'm in New York, he comes up to New York and he trains at his academy over there, and then when we're down here in Miami, he trains at the gym where he trains. So it makes it pretty easy. And me being the practice owner, I make my own schedule. So like whenever I want to go travel with him to wherever for a fight or a tournament or something like that, I just block my schedule out.
So you both support each other in your endeavors.
Definitely.
So there's no holdback, in other words, which is really nice.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. I think what people may struggle with at times is that one spouse, for whatever reason, may not be supportive of the growth of the other spouse in whatever endeavor that they want to do. And obviously, in order for a relationship to thrive, you both have to be on the same page and grow together.
Yeah, and I think too, in part is because he's also an immigrant, and I'm from immigrant parents. We both have that similar survival mode drive with our careers. So he has to make it. He had to get out of Brazil. Brazil was not doing well. So he had to get out of Brazil. He had to fight, be the best. And me, coming from immigrant parents and having all the adversities that I had growing up, it was that survival of like, I got to work, I got to make it.
Well, I want to talk about how you met Vinny, because people may not know that you didn't just meet per chance. You were in the gym. I mean, didn't you guys meet in the gym?
Yeah, so I have a blue belt in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And so we met in jiu-jitsu. That's how we met in New York City.
So how long had you been doing jiu-jitsu before you met him?
I started doing jiu-jitsu in 2014. And then him and I met in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, 2018.
So I have a passion for fitness. I have a passion for exercise. I think it balances me. Kristen has a passion. She loves it too. You obviously have a passion. I think it's crucial to have balance in life. How has that interest, obviously you met your spouse, but how do you reconcile the jiu-jitsu with your career? Like how does it energize you, for lack of a better term?
Actually, simple. Discipline.
Okay.
Jiu-jitsu is a martial art that takes time, and it's very, there's a lot of discipline, and it's very, very cerebral. So you have to think. And so I think with my career and that, it goes literally hand in hand. So when I went back to New York City, I used to close my office from 12 to 2 so I can go train jiu-jitsu. And then I would come back to the office.
Discipline.
I was completely disciplined. I was totally dedicated to the sport and, also my office. And at that time I was focused on nothing else but jiu-jitsu and my work.
So that's really important for our listeners and our viewers, because I'm very protective over my gym time, and Kristen's supportive of our gym time. Both of us, because we know that energizes us. That's part of our lifestyle. So you made it a point as well to take that time out, notwithstanding your success in running your shop, to actually go and fill the cup, so to speak, the way you fill the cup.
Well, I think, after so many years of working so hard, I came to a standstill where I was like, hold on, what about me? My self-care. Mm-hmm. And so that's when jiu-jitsu came into play. And so when I started jiu-jitsu, it was just so sacred for me, those 2 hours. It's my time. So you're going to see me, you're going to book when am I available. And that's it, because those 2 times that I'm training is absolute critical for me. It's my self-care.
The discipline that you get in martial arts, the discipline that you have to have a routine and go and do it consistently. You check out from life's noise, so to speak, to take care of yourself.
Right.
And it's interesting you bring that up, because before I met my wife, there was a period of time, for a long period of time, almost a decade, where I didn't do any workouts. I wasn't training. And I had been in bodybuilding and training most of my life after high school. And I think I was in a depression, frankly, at the time. But I also remember getting criticized by having an interest when I was in my younger years as an aspiring lawyer, that I shouldn't focus on something like that. I should always focus on my career. I should always focus on my business. And I think those are terrible. I think it's terrible advice, because you can't grow in your career without having that ability to grow within. You are stymied, and you're only essentially nurturing one part of your brain or one part of your life. And eventually, like a cancer, that other part is going to grow and eclipse anything that may happen success-wise. And you see it with people with heart attacks. You see it with people, with addiction issues, drinking. There's so many different variables, so many things that happen. And once the switch for me came on and I was able to get back into it, I've never felt better. And I do the same thing you do. If it's time for me to go to the gym, I'm going to block off on my calendar and I'm going to go to the gym because I know that's my time. And I've trained the staff, and people around that I work with will know. And I don't have an issue, even my client base, explaining that's what I do. For me, it's a lifestyle, just as it is for you. It's a lifestyle, and it's never going to stop. I will always be that way. And I actually find even more clarity in and more successes with the discipline.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I didn't learn about balance because I didn't have any balance. I didn't have balance growing up, especially, again, I had to put myself through college. I didn't have any handouts or anything. So having to work full time and go to school at night was really difficult for me. And then aside from all the adversities and all the childhood trauma that I had growing up, I was in a constant state of like anxiety and depression. And so it was not until, when I was really established in New York City, I just said, you know what, I have to do something for myself to start taking care of me internally so that I can be better at my job and everything. And I kid you not, ever since when I started jiu-jitsu in 2014 and so forth, my practice only grew and I only got better as a person, internally. Wow. With everything in general. So like my relationships with people, with patients, my mood, the way that, even my sleep cycle, my eating habits, everything significantly improved from me just having that discipline and being into something that I was passionate about and something that would take me away from the constant rat race that I was in for.
What got you into the martial arts to begin with? How did you gain an interest in that?
So, I was in school for almost like 12 years nonstop. And it was always like the rat race of like working and going to school, late nights. I was just really anxious and really, really depressed. And I was like, I have to do something. Like I need to find something to give me joy. And at that time, I think I drove past like some random gym and I saw something about like Krav Maga and martial arts. I'm like, you know what? Let me learn to defend myself. So I started with Krav Maga initially.
Under the guise of potentially defending yourself.
I ended up doing Krav Maga. And so I did Krav Maga for a little bit. And then after that, I transitioned slowly into jiu-jitsu. And that's how it happened.
And then you just,
and then the
love just developed.
Yeah, it just
on
developed.
And on. Because I know when I talked to Vinny about it, he's like, he has such a passion for it. And I don't grapple. I don't even think I could touch my toes. I'm trying. I'm trying to stretch more and more now. But as far as just the endorphin release and just the whole experience, he gets an immediate high off of it. I'm assuming that you get that same thing.
You need that for mental health.
Yeah.
It's you have to do something for mental health. And I think this is also why it sparked my interest into getting my post-grad certification in mental health, because I see how critical it is.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because you have not stopped. Most people in your position would probably just be happy with, you've got substantial credentialing, you've got 2 successful clinics, throughout the country, and you could pretty much run autopilot, but you made a decision to go back to school.
You know what I recently learned through like psychoanalyzing myself, that I'm just never satisfied. I'm never satisfied. And I feel that like if I want to do something or if I've had interest in something, I have to go get it. I just have to go get it. So mental health was kind of in the back of my mind before or during my master's program. I was like, should I do primary care or mental health? What should I do? And so I ended up going towards primary care. But now fast forward to 5 years after my doctorate, it's just after the pandemic, I feel like everyone got even crazier. And so it has brought up a lot of mental illness, and we really do have a crisis globally. And so, yeah, that's why.
Well, what's really interesting, and we could talk about this a little bit, segue a little bit into your practice, is that, there's the issue with people in body dysmorphia. There, you're obviously seeing patients, and we know that, the industry itself has exponentially grown since you started. We talked about it earlier to where it is now. I mean, I see it as cowboys and Indians. Basically, it's not a regulated industry. And there obviously is mental implications to certain people depending upon, their exposure to social media, their idea of what perfection is. And, you have, unfortunately, in the industry, so many options. A patient has so many options to essentially doctor shop, for lack of a better term, to have somebody give them what they may want, even though both medically and mentally, they shouldn't be getting it. And maybe they should be getting some other type of treatment. Right. Talk a little bit about that.
So the issue with the industry is, I mean, it's a double-edged sword here because the aesthetic industry has grown approximately 13% every single year for the last 5 years. And as you had mentioned earlier, everyone with XYZ degree is just opening up shop with no experience, no education, no credit, nothing. And so what's happening too is you have the psychological effects of social media that has affected everybody. It has made everybody self-conscious. Everybody has this body dysphoria, this body dysmorphia, and expectation of what a body should or should not look like because of Photoshop. All these filters have ruined people. And so
Kardashians.
Right. And then you have celebrities, right? So you have that toxic circle. And then you also have the unfortunate circle of all of these people that want to make a quick buck and they open a med spa and they are in it for the money. They're not really in it for truly to care for people. So in our industry, there is every single day, there is somebody that has some form of psychiatric underlying issue, whether it be anxiety, depression, body dysmorphia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. And I come across it every single day in clinic. And so with this, I'm able to steer people to do something maybe less invasive, or maybe something like, hey, give them a little bit more clarity, guide them away from potentially doing something that they can look crazy or harm themselves. Like girls, for example, getting these butt shots. They know it's illegal. They know it's dangerous, but they have this idea in their head that they need to have these hips, and they'll go to any direction to get it, even though it's been, medically advised that you should not or whatever. And maybe I don't know, maybe through my education, maybe through my therapy, my therapeutic communication, I've been able to steer women from not doing something like that. So I think that's because it's so prevalent in our industry. I think that's also a driving force why I want to do my postgrad in mental health, because I can help people a little bit more.
That's great. I mean, I represent some clinics down in Miami, and there, I think we did an analysis within a 5-mile radius demographically. There was something like 80 or 90 clinics within this 5-mile radius. And I was dealing with a client who was dealing with a non-compete in a particular area, and which is mind-boggling as far as, obviously it's a concentrated area, but you touched on another point in that people are opening up the clinics to make money, and money is something that I touched upon when in Kristen's podcast, when she opened up her practice, that she didn't want to take on debt. And part of the reason she didn't want to take on debt is that she didn't want to be compromised by her practice. In other words, she didn't want to give filler or do something type of treatment to somebody just because she could make a buck and she needs to feed her debt. She wanted to practice medicine, so to speak, and do the right thing for the patient, which is what you're talking about too. But what these clinics, all these shops that are opening up, people out of school, just going, say, to nursing school, getting out, maybe getting their doctorate in nursing right away, no practical experience.
No practical experience.
It's not
correct.
required. And then they're injecting, and then before you know it, they've got, because they're popular with Instagram. They grew up in an Instagram work. They have all these followers, and unbeknownst to the patient, they're just getting whatever the patient, giving the patient whatever they want,
right?
For the buck,
yeah.
On it, notwithstanding the mental issues, notwithstanding the health issues, and the industry is not regulated.
No.
Let's face it, you have regulations within the professional's licensure itself, but you don't have regulations in the aggregate, very minor statutorily, as far as dealing with the aesthetic practice itself. So you gain this interest, obviously, because you have a bevy of patients that are coming to see you. We're not saying these patients have mental issues, but some of them potentially have, either a body dysmorphia issue or want to exaggerate their look because of social media and other factors.
Yeah.
How do you balance your counsel with them, with the practice itself?
Well, I'm very straightforward. I just tell people how it is. And I think, honestly, for the most part, again, I've been in that whole social media realm for a really long time, since 2011. And so my personality projects out there on these platforms. So I tend to attract maybe certain specific people, right? So when people come to my office and if they ask me, hey, I want to do this, what do you think? Or if I think something is off, I just tell them.
So you,
I literally just tell them.
You're at a point in your career and with your acumen and that you're not just going to drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Because I think because I think the problem is that people are afraid to tell people something like that because they're afraid to offend them. They're afraid to, lose the business. I'm not afraid to lose the business. I've been in the business since 2011. I have thousands of patients that come in, year to year. So for me, it's like, it's a very well-oiled machine. So I don't depend on like new patients, for example. Like I don't have to take your dollar because, my practice debt. I have no practice debt. I don't have any debt, actually. Not even personally, I don't have any debt. So for the most part, the people that come to my practice and I'm honest with them, they appreciate that. And I'll tell them why. I'll explain to them why exactly. And I just give it to them straight up. Like, hey, you know what? Like, look, this is really unrealistic because this, that, and the third. Or, hey, it's unsafe because this, and the third. But you can do this, or you can do this other thing. Or, hey, don't do this at all because this could happen.
Do you think that the majority of your patients, they come to see you either through your platform on social media or referrals? Do you think predominantly that's where you get your
I would say that
base?
90% of my client base is from social media.
Okay.
And you can actually see it because if you read like even my comments or even my reviews, the majority of people will say, I love her on social media. I love her presence. I love how straightforward and honest she is. So people have developed that like trust with me, that they know that I'm not going to do anything to them that might not be safe, or it's not, it's not warranted. Maybe they have like their own perception of what they want to get done, but it's not the right thing. They know, they trust that I'm going to do right by them.
So it's twofold for me, what I see here. What I see here is that the people are somewhat screened already when they're coming in to see you from an expectation perspective, especially through social media, because they already know how you are because you are so vocal. So you're going to tell it like it is. So they're not going to kind of spoon feed you any type of crap or junk in which, they want, 3X lips or some ridiculous,
Right.
it's not going to fly with you. So
No.
and if they followed you and seen how outspoken you
Right.
are, from that perspective, I think that's great, because you're basically filtering out the problems on the front end,
Right.
not even really.
Well, people
dealing with
know.
them.
People know that I say no.
Yeah.
And you can, you can literally go on Yelp, on Google, and even in just and make comments. My patient will say, oh, she's very honest. She told me no on this. I didn't need this, and I'm so glad. And people will share their experience with me at my office where I say no.
What strikes me with regard to you and our discussion is that you are not afraid to be who you are. In other words, you are okay with somebody maybe not liking you. You recognize that it's not a popularity contest, that I'm going to be who I am. You're going to either like the way I present and what I do in my job, or you're not, and I'm not for you. So in other words, you're not making yourself available for everybody across the board. You have the confidence in yourself, which, as we talked about earlier, you developed becoming more outspoken. And that confidence clearly has allowed you to grow in your career and personally as well. So talk to me just a little bit about that aspect of your life. In other words, you have made decisions, and I've seen this day in, day out with people, where they will sacrifice their comfort, their little voice in the back of their head saying, no, I probably shouldn't do that, but no, I need to do that for whatever reason. How have you reconciled this approach in dealing with people in your career?
Well, like I stated before, I was picked on, as a kid. I had people not like me. I was not the popular girl in school. So fast forward to now, I'm not here to please anybody. I'm not here to do anything for nobody. And so because I did have to fight for myself, I had to put myself through school. I had to figure everything out by myself. I think now the way that I see it is like, I'm here for me, and I'm here to do me. Whether I end up failing, I fail only myself. I'm not failing nobody else. I fail myself. If I succeed, I'm succeeding myself. So I don't know any loyalty. I don't know anybody, anything, because I'm self-made. And I think that's why I feel comfortable if people don't like me. That's okay. You don't have to like me. Not everyone's going to like me. And I'm completely comfortable with that now, as an adult. Maybe in my earlier 20s, I wasn't, because I didn't have that confidence. But now, if you don't like me, that's okay. It doesn't affect my personal life, doesn't affect my relationship with my husband, doesn't affect my family life, and it doesn't affect my practice either.
And that balance that you've developed, and that's crucial, I think. In the aggregate, you attribute it to the experiences that you've gone through, including your focus in your own health and your own education. Do you think that it's pieces of different things that have developed to put you in the place that you're in now, to have that mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said before, when I had that breakthrough after high school of speaking up for myself and standing up for myself, that's given me the confidence to just be me, and be transparent about who I am. And like I said, I've been on the social media space for a really long time, and I've always been outspoken. I've had trolls. I've had people write really nice things about me. I've had several pages made about me in a negative way. I've had people write bad Google reviews that have never even been to my practice, but just to try and hurt my business. And like we spoke earlier, my Instagram's been taken down twice because people have reported my page for being too outspoken, maybe saying something that they didn't like. But I'm going to keep saying and being who I am.
And keep moving forward.
Yeah. It doesn't affect me. It really doesn't affect me. And I think from before, when I've had my Instagram taken down, or when people have written bad things about me on social media, I realized it didn't affect me at all, because the people that know me, really know me, are unbothered by that. They're like, oh, they can know that is not true. The people that know me, and they can see the BS. If anybody writes something, they know that it's BS. So when I realized that it wasn't affecting my practice. It wasn't affecting my business or anything. That's kind of where I was like, oh, well, what does it matter if people talk bad about me? What does it matter if people don't like me? I don't care if I'm not the popular girl on Instagram. What does it matter? What matters is that people know that I'm genuine and that I'm very real and authentic.
That's a huge breakthrough to be able to do that, because you're putting yourself out there to begin with. And there are trolls. We know that across the board in any industry. And you have been able to develop a moxie and a strength where it doesn't bother you. You move forward. And I think people who are watching and listening need to really take that into consideration. Number one, if they have any interest in being in a social media space, and number two, if they have any interest in being an entrepreneur, because at the end of the day, it's not a popular contest. It's not. It's being an entrepreneur and being your own business person is a very lonely place, especially in the beginning. And people have a tendency to only see the end result. And one of the reasons why I put together this podcast is because I wanted to kind of like take the curtain away and let people see that the individuals that we're speaking to had a journey to get to where they are now. And that journey was filled with challenges. And some of the things you shared with us, it's incredible how you kind of shifted your thought process to become this strong, independent woman in light of all your challenges.
And one thing that I want to say too is there's like 1 million med spas per radius. So if you want to be a successful business owner and you want to set yourself aside from everyone else, then you need to be able to take heat. You're not going to be you might not be able to be the most popular person. Haters are always going to hate. I know that's super cliche, but like people don't like to see other people successful. So that comes with the territory. That comes with the territory of being successful. That comes with the territory of having a business that is set aside from the rest. And so anytime that somebody trolls me, anytime somebody says something negative about me, that they don't like how I express myself or whatever it is, I just remember that on the back of my mind that, hey, 2 or 3 people might not like me, but I also have a database of almost 10,000 patients in New York City from 2011 that do like me, and I have a 76% retention rate of my clients that stay in my practice. I have people that have been seeing me since, 2011. Obviously, I'm doing something right.
And I think that part also goes to a discussion that we had earlier, and I bring this up with my guest, is imposter syndrome and the challenges that you deal with as an entrepreneur and as a successful business person, where you're still questioning your acumen in your own particular industry because of innate fear or this concept that maybe I'm not worthy of where I am, even though I went through everything. So you validate that issue of potential fear by the numbers you just quoted. You already look to your client base, you look to your conversion factors, you look and see where you are with things. And obviously, in part, that's because you want to reinforce in your mind that you are doing the right thing. And obviously that comes through with regard to your success and your client base.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like anytime that I'm feeling that imposter syndrome where I'm like, hold on, am I doing something good? Am I doing this right? Sometimes, that doubt comes from, and now I'm past that, but sometimes, oh my gosh, this person has more followers than I do. How is this person more popular than I am? But then I remember, I'm like, wait, a lot of these people have bot followers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, and a lot of these people are in this like ridiculous, like social media popularity contest, but they really don't have a lot of patience. And so I always refer back to my numbers because numbers don't lie. And I have a great CPA that is like, listen, you have been growing steadily since 2017. You've grown this much, this much, this much. And even last year, it's just like the last 2 years, I had incredible growth. And even though, for example, like my social media account hasn't grown much, but like my business is growing. And regardless of what I have said or speak about or whatever on social media. So I always have to refer back to my numbers when it comes to
numbers don't lie.
Because numbers don't lie.
Yeah. Yeah, the numbers don't lie, and it goes to show you that it's whatever you're doing is working, notwithstanding what you may think something is going on. One of the interesting points you brought up too that I want to talk a little bit about is that you said that you're essentially debt free. So I think it's crucial for anybody who's, endeavoring to get into business or do something in regard to business to balance the cost of debt associated with their own personal anxiety issues and how they deal with money and their future plans, because you don't want the debt or the nuts, so to speak, that you have to hit every month to affect your professionalism and your ability to do what you want to do and succeed. It will eat you alive. And you made a decision on your own, obviously for your own lifestyle purposes and the way you deal with money and finances. You came to terms with how you want to approach that. Now, in the beginning, maybe you needed to do, something, but you got to a place where you said, you know what, I don't want to have debt. Kristen talked about that. She didn't want to have debt. So it goes to, I guess, an internal analysis of oneself to really look in the mirror and say, what am I going to be happy with and how am I going to move forward if I'm going to choose this path of entrepreneurship? So talk to me a little bit about that, with how you did all that.
Well, the number one thing is you can't compare yourself to anybody else, and you cannot compare your success to anybody else. So you have to stay focused on only you and focus on your own personal stepping stones. So what I see now with a lot of med spas and a lot of like nurses and doctors that are just now starting in that entrepreneur space is that they want to be able to offer everything that everyone else is offering. So they get into debt by buying hundreds of thousands of dollars in lasers and all of these things when they don't have the client base just
to support it.
Support it. And so, for example, when I first started, I literally just had Botox and filler. That's it. I had Botox, cosmetic, and I had 2 fillers, Juvederm, and I don't know what else. Like, that was it. And I used to order every single week. And I would look at the schedule the following week, and I would see, okay, I have, 20 fillers. So I would order 22 fillers. And then that was it. And I would only buy what I needed. And that's how I started. And so fast forward to now, it's like, I have no debt. I owe nobody nothing. But now I'm at a place where if I want to offer something, I have the client base and I can pay for it outright without having to be a slave to that debt. So a lot of people will buy these $200,000 lasers and they're like, oh my gosh. So I have a $2,500 a month payment. I have to do X amount of treatments to pay off.
It's exactly what happens.
Which is dumb.
Yeah, it's exactly what happens.
It's dumb. So that you really can't do that. You're going to put yourself in a bad financial situation, but also you're going to compromise yourself professionally and as a person, because now you have to get that dollar. So even though you know that patient might not be the best candidate, you don't care. You need to get that dollar. So you're going to do a treatment that the patient doesn't need, or they're not, or they're going to have maybe like a bad outcome, or a subpar result. Then that patient's going to go back. They're going to write you a bad review, and that's going to reflect on your business. Less people are going to come see you. It's a whole chain of events that you have to take into account. So never be a slave to the dollar.
Yeah, and that unfortunately is heavy within your industry. Yeah. When you see these spas opening up, you have people who have limited experience and they're opening up these spas. Right. They're probably getting funded by who knows where. The banks are giving them money, family, who knows where the money's coming from.
But keep in mind too, like for me at least, aesthetics was a hobby. Aesthetics was a hobby. It started as a hobby. And even now, I don't consider it a job. It's still kind of like a hobby for me. So I don't treat it as like, oh my gosh, I have to make this money. You know what I mean? Because I don't think of it as like, oh, it's my livelihood. I have to make this money. I don't, because it literally started as a hobby. My job and my passion was the ICU, and it just developed that way.
But in fairness, your hobby is your passion.
But yeah, I mean,
it became your passion.
It became a passion of mine. It became a passion of mine. But I'm not pressed that I have to make this money this month or every month to pay this or pay that.
Well, you first and foremost, you're a medical provider versus an aesthetic. You're not there to just provide a service to somebody. It's more of a holistic view that you're taking. And I think what ends up happening with a lot of these injectors and these people, it's just, especially when you really don't have any, like I said, any regulatory basis. There's nothing there protecting the patient. Anybody can go in and say, oh yeah, we'll give you X amount of injections or do this or do that. And, they're going to make the money on it. They don't care, in and out, move on. Got to cover that nut every month, versus looking at the whole piece of things. So it's very interesting that while you say that it was necessary, it was your hobby, you have the foundational background of being a medical provider first and foremost. And
well,
it transcends.
Most of my patients grew up with me too, in the sense that they've been with me in my practice throughout my professional growth. So, I've had patients that saw me back in 2011 when I was an RN, and I've been treating them ever since. And they've seen my growth going through my master's program, becoming a family nurse practitioner. Even now at this point, I've become primary care to some of my patients. So I do offer a holistic approach in my patients. It's not like a revolving door where you just come in, get your Botox, get out type situation. I know most of my patients, I've known them for years.
And they trust you, obviously.
And they trust me, and I know their kids, I know their family members, and a lot of them, I am their primary care access.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. So you've told us a lot of interesting data points, incredible. A lot of successes, a lot of challenges you faced as you grew in dealing with people. But what about some of the additional struggles you may have faced in having your practice? And like, for example, how did you know what legal documents that you needed for your practice, or how to manage money? Like, how did that become a skill set for you?
Honestly, I think it's taken a whole decade for me to finally be able to tell you now that I finally have it together. But it's taken this long for me to get it together. And I think in the beginning, when I first started, I knew obviously I needed consent forms and I needed all of those things, but I didn't know about like operation agreements and, contract agreements and all of those things. And I didn't have an attorney to review over contracts. So a really hard lesson that I learned was with a laser company. I didn't read the contract. I didn't have a attorney to review it. And this was many years ago, but I went based on what the rep who sold me the device.
The laser rep.
Yeah, laser rep.
The story about a laser rep is you want to get rid of a laser rep, buy a laser. You'll never see him again.
Yep. That was exactly what happened. So he said, hey, like, we guarantee, I promise you're going to like pay off this device in 4 months. And, if you don't have like the number of patients by like 90 days, well, you can just return it back. I said, okay, fine. So this is what he told me. And so 90-day comes around. I want to return the device because I'm like, hey, this is not making me any money. And the consumable is too high. And the cost for the procedure for patients is kind of high as well. And so totally ghosted me. I ended up like not paying for the device because I was like, screw this, you guys can take it back. The bank came and got the device, and I thought that the company was getting the device back, and then we were clear.
It was repossessed, in other words.
It was repossessed. Fast forward to 4 years later, I end up getting a letter from an attorney saying that the bank is suing me for the remaining $80,000 on the laser device, and that if I didn't pay within like 7 days, that they were going to start like getting my assets now. And they had, at this point, they had done like a whole like background check on me, and they knew that I owned, these properties and this, that. So they went after all of that. And so I ended up having to cough out in 6 days, 80 grand to pay off that loan. And that was a really hard lesson for me because, I should have gotten an attorney to review the contract, and I just should have never trusted the rep who was making a contract. But that's the thing in this industry, unfortunately, that a lot of these reps, you have to be very careful because their objective is to sell and get that commission. They're going to swindle you with whatever, words. And I got totally swindled.
So you were trusting, like as you should be. And unfortunately, you're right. There are people that are there. Those reps make money on the commission.
Yeah, and I had nothing to show for it because the laser was repossessed.
Yeah.
So not only that it got repossessed, but also I ended up having to pay out $80,000 4 years later.
Wow. What a story.
So it was terrible.
So fast forward, you learn obviously an important lesson in that you need to surround yourself with competent people to help you in areas that you may need help in, whether it be in legal, whether it be accounting. How have you been able to pick the right people? Like, I know you mentioned you're really happy with your accountant. Obviously, that's peace of mind on the front end, because a lot of practices could get into trouble. I think that, we don't need to get into it could be a whole podcast with regard to self-employment taxes and LLCs and paying yourself a wage from your business and a corporation and not paying taxes properly.
Right.
What did you do as you built your business to make those decisions?
So I had another CPA that I tried, and that ended up being a complete disaster because my business wasn't properly like on file as like an S corp and all that stuff, and it was a mess. I ended up getting an audit, and so that audit it just kind of and the way that they responded to that audit was what triggered me to seek another CPA. So I ended up getting a referral for another CPA. And the difference between those two CPAs is that the CPA that I had before, I had never met the guy. We had only spoken over the phone and had Zoom consults. But the second guy, he came down from Boca and came and had like an in-office meeting with me. He wanted to come and see my space. He wanted to see what I do. He was really genuinely interested in his client. And the guy is very passionate about like finances and stuff. And you can just, you felt when you talk vibe. You feel the vibe. Like, he knows his stuff very well. I was like, hey, like, this is the situation. Like, I'm now a resident here in New York and this and the business and all this stuff. And he was like, listen, I have a previous New York State tax auditor on my team. I have these people, and he had all these people that have different designations and specialties within his business that made me feel confident in his practice. And they're so thorough with everything, and they respond to everything immediately. So I've been with them for a few years now, and I mean, they've helped me with like money management as well. He put me in touch with the very good financial advisor, and so through making those connections, he's been able to place me with other people that can manage my money.
So in summary, basically, you found somebody who you connected with after the experience with the prior accountant, and now you have this trusted relationship with this accountant. Correct. Which gives you peace of mind. So you surround Correct. Yourself with somebody who's got your back, so to speak, to help you. Right.
And then, and even from like a practice standpoint, like the back end with all the consent forms and all the legal forms that we have to do, when I met Kristen, your wife, also, she was such a huge help, because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have this form. Do you have this form? Do you have that form? And she provided those forms for me, but she provided that support without asking anything in return. And so now, fast forward to now, we've been friends for many years, and it's like, I feel very comfortable and confident with having her on my corner, because she also is very knowledgeable with that through you. And,
she knows her stuff, and
she knows her stuff.
We're able to work together. I told her she should go back. Well, we don't want her to go to law school because
I told her the same thing. Well. I said you should go back to law school.
I know she's doing very well with the practice.
Wonderful.
But yeah, it's a nice relationship.
So it's surrounding yourself with people that know a lot about something, anything, right? And using all those resources collaboratively to, put yourself together.
I think that it brings up an interesting point that you can't know everything. And even though as an entrepreneur, we have this focus and this goal, and sometimes it takes on a life of its own, right? Like you were talking about how your aesthetic practice just pulled you and you ended up growing so quickly.
Right.
But you can't know everything. And so you try the best that you can. your intent with the laser person. You weren't being, in hindsight, were you a little negligent? Maybe you should have done certain things. You didn't do it, but your passion and your focus is building up your business. So you're not
Right.
necessarily thinking about these things, but it is very important, and especially in today's litigious world, to ensure that you get surrounded by a good team of people to
Right.
help you, because you can't know everything. And then trust is so crucial as well, because even with you now, so you've got your practice in New York, you've got your practice in Miami, they're working together, right? They're working at the same time. So you have to have trusted folks that are running the show for you in New York when you're in Miami, and vice versa.
Yeah, and at the same time also protecting myself and protecting my practice and my assets.
Yeah.
So I think, honestly, it's been just a long, like 12-year journey of like learning, just going through the steps, just learning it.
What a story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's it. That's an interesting one. Let's talk a little bit about, I know that when you were coming in, you were telling me, and I knew this personally, that you had an issue with Instagram, and they ended up taking down your account.
Yeah.
That was the Injector Zoe
Yeah.
that you had since 2011.
Yeah. So my account's been taken down like 2 or 3 times already, and it's just from censorship. And it's mainly because I either say something that somebody doesn't like and they report me, or I post something that may be controversial that Instagram and their algorithms don't like, such as maybe some facts about the vaccine. You really can't talk about the vaccine now. You have to either just talk about it in a positive light. You can't say anything contradictory or anything like that regarding the vaccine, because then you're taken down and you're flagged as misinformation and you're shadow banned.
It's mind-boggling, and so that obviously has a trickle effect on your practice. Where they shut the door down on that one. You had another IG account though, right? You had
Indigo?
So
I have that one as my backup. So I had been using that one for the last 3 months because Injector Zoe got taken down again. And again, it's always about something either like political or just something that the algorithm doesn't like, flags it as like misinformation when it's not misinformation.
The bottom line to it, it's ubiquitous. In other words, we cannot define it. You have some anecdotal entity, whether it be through an algorithm like you suggest, or some person makes a decision that whatever you may say, for whatever reason, they find it offensive. And that's the scary part about social media, I think, in the beginning of the development of it and where we are now. You don't know what you don't know, right? So you don't necessarily know if what you may be saying or doing is something that they're going to view offensive and could essentially affect your livelihood, depending upon how dependent you may be on that platform.
Yeah. I mean, for example, me, 90% of my business comes from Instagram. Like that's how people find me. That's how I showcase my before and after. That's where I showcase my education and all that information. So when my account was taken down, several people couldn't find me because the account was completely deactivated. And so I have a Facebook dedicated account manager. Not even he can help me with it. So I had to
What'd you end up doing?
I ended up recruiting like outside sources, a hacker, and he got my Instagram back.
Wow.
But it's unfortunate because, we live in a society now that like everything triggers everybody. Everyone is sensitive to everything. Everything is offensive. So what can you say? And then not only that, I've had people impersonate me as well. On my account. So like Facebook doesn't offer any kind of business protection. So I had an account that was posing as me and was going through my list of followers, sent everybody a message saying, oh, hey, you have an appointment coming up very soon. Please make sure to enter your deposits here. So I did have 2 patients scammed like that because they literally did have an appointment with me coming up and they thought that this was a legit account and they stole my content and a picture of me and everything. And my patients sent money to God knows where, and they don't offer any kind of support in that regard at all.
And I'm dealing with it now with a UK client of mine, a friend of mine who's dealing with the same thing, can't even get verified. I think that's a whole other game that they started to roll in with this verification check, but there's no accountability. Our letters are getting ignored. I think the next step for us is possibly have to file suit, but at the end of the day, there's such a lack of accountability on their end as far as, number one, what is so offensive to begin with, if you're talking the truth, who is your, the censorship, all the stuff that we see what happened with Elon Musk with Twitter, it's the same thing. And, for me, it segues to this medium, which I'm so happy we have. We have a platform in which we can openly discuss issues. We may not all agree, but at least we can discuss. And, we can get into politics and talk about different circumstances. Like I went on a rant about this Dylan Mulvaney, which is something. What are your thoughts about that? That's something that I get frustrated about. Basically trying to acquire a gender and appropriating the gender. And the fact that the feminists, nobody's out there to say anything or do anything about it, and kind of wanting the world to acquiesce to this small subset of what I believe, and it may be, it's my opinion that I believe that the majority, there's some mental illness associated with some of these people, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's gender dysphoria, right? I mean, that's a fact. You can't deny it. It is a fact. I think that, I'm a big, LGBTQ supporter. Most of my friends are from the community, they're gay. But the thing of it is that I see this as an issue with like this whole war of women and against like trans women is crazy. And I think it's just this Generation Z TikTok generation that started it, because nobody had a problem with trans women to begin with. Trans women, they've been through a lot the last few decades to earn their spot as, trans women. And so these few people that have instigated the war against women, now what they're trying to do is they're trying to appropriate women by calling us cis women, which in my opinion and several other women's opinion is a very offensive term. You can't try to appropriate us and give us an appropriation name to validate your
view or
anything for a
or
small,
your identity,
or,
whatever you
for
may,
an idea, right? And so, and I think it's funny because they're fighting for rights, and they're talking about women's rights. The feminists, where are they? Because this is actually misogyny. This is literally misogyny, what is happening.
Absolutely.
So, but, all of this feminist movement, like, where are they? They're nowhere to be found.
I tried to rationalize, why some of this is happening with this woke generation and this virtue signaling. And, I blame a lot with regard to the parents. I blame the school system. I blame the fact that nobody wants to stand. I should say nobody, but a lot of people aren't standing up and they're not saying, no, we're not going to take that. You may have that view, and you can have that view, but don't impart your view or how you think on me. This is still America. We live in a free society. Not to mention, I think that there's a lack within generations. There's just a lack of historical context. In other words, a lot of these young people have no idea what parents, grandparents, great-great-parents, what the women went through to begin with, to even get to the point that they're at now. And this is taking like a backward seat. There's just they don't have reference. Just same thing with the socialism aspect of things and fascism. They don't have a reference. They're Google generation. They're instant gratification generation. So while that could potentially explain some of the behavior, it doesn't necessarily negate that it shouldn't be tolerated. That in addition to the mainstream media. And again, so happy we have podcasts and avenues to have discourse, different opinions, and talk about different things.
But like I said, I think it's mainly that like Gen Z TikTok generation, because I have friends that have been trans women for over 20 years and they do not agree on this topic at all with what's going on, especially in TikTok with that. They're like, we do not support that. This is crazy, because
with the youth,
at the end of the day,
I
mean, because at the end of the day, and myself as a natural born woman, when you try to appropriate names for us to validate your gender dysmorphia or whatever you got going on. It's very offensive when you want to take away titles like women. Like, you don't know what women go through to give birth. You were born of a woman. So to get rid of like that, like, and call it birthing people. No, it's not birthing people. We're women, period. We go through issues with like, our cycles, breastfeeding, having children and all that stuff.
So offensive.
To have those titles stripped from women is just very offensive. And all of my trans friends in my circle, at least, they're millennials and older. They all agree and they all say the same thing, but it's just a very tiny, small pool of people. I don't know if they're like kind of like in it to create some kind of toxic atmosphere to distract people. I don't know, but at least a lot of like the trans women that I follow on TikTok, there's even some young ones too that are Gen Z. They're all totally against this whole like movement of appropriating and calling born women cis women, which is not cool.
I take it to another level when I see these children, 2-3-year-old children, and their parents are coddling them and allowing them to, or somehow indulging them to tell them they want to be a different gender, is mind-boggling to me. I mean, it's tantamount to child abuse. And then the aspect of some of these states allowing essential mutilation to take place with these young kids. It's just an abomination. I get so upset about this and what's happening, where we care as human beings for human beings, but they need certain treatment if they're at that level of this gender dysmorphia. They don't need acquiescence to their condition and telling them, oh yes, we need to go and validate your mental deficit by allowing you to do these things. And what I find even more offensive is through the virtue signaling aspect of things is that the odds of number one, having a child that may in fact have a condition that warrants a change to a female or a male is so rare. And then when you have multiple siblings within a family that may have that, and it just happens to be maybe a celebrity, or just happens to be,
Right.
It's, to me, it's just despicable where somebody gets on. It's basically
Well,
getting
I think
on
that there's something like more deeper than what is going on than this, because the trans community, they account for less than 1%, right? And so, the chances of somebody being born like both genders is extremely, extremely rare, where they actually do need medical treatment, for something like that. But I think that there is something like much more greater than that is more of like a distraction, and the mainstream media making it a thing. They're making it a thing. They're making it a problem when there was no problem to begin with. A lot of people are upset, for example, that there's states that are banning gender transitioning for children. And so people are protesting and everything. But when you really look at the grand scheme of things, how many children are there really transitioning, under the age of 12? 0. How many children have transitioned before age of 12 in the state of Florida? Let's say 0. So the people that are protesting, I get why they're protesting for their rights. Okay, I get it. But in reality, how many children do you really have like a line out the door of children that are trying to transition before the age of 12? Like, there has been 0 cases. So why is everybody mad? I think it's just much bigger, the problem.
Yeah, I think
They're making a problem out of a place where there's no problem.
I agree with you. What I think what occurs sometimes is that they lead us down this path, the mass media, and with that path, this hysteria can develop, and they think they can control, and somehow, some way, they're controlling, and at the end of the day, they want us to be as reliant as possible on government. One way or the other, if you're reliant on government, then they can control you. And that's more of a bigger picture type issue, but I kind of view it along those lines. That's why I think it's even more important for us as entrepreneurs and successful business people to fight back when necessary, to allow, if we have the opportunity, I have the opportunity to have open discourse and have this podcast as a medium to be able to talk about different things rather than be shunned to have an opinion. And one of the things I learned through law school and in practicing law is that, there's many instances there's no black and white. It's gray, right? But in order to even get to the gray, you have to be able to communicate. And so, you're going to have two different opinions. But if for all us to move forward, we have to be able to communicate. And unfortunately, between mainstream media and the actions of many, we're silenced. And many people get silenced, or hysteria, like you said, it becomes hysteria when it really shouldn't be.
Well, the thing is, too, with social media, you have all these algorithms and they're literally feeding you deliberate stuff that they want to, and so like if you click on, I don't know, something, then you're going to see a bunch of ads that pop up just about that topic. So like, let's say for right now, you and I are sitting here talking about, transgender and gender dysmorphia and all this stuff or whatever. If I open my TikTok, I guarantee you're going to see all of
through
the stuff.
mic of the phone.
Right.
It picks it up.
Right.
On
it's
the
going to
app.
pick it up and everything. And I think it's just like, once the government is like involved in like social issues like this, it's no good.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Like if you want to be a woman, if you want to be a man, I don't care. Nobody cares. Literally nobody cares. The problem is that when you involve government and the government is now like in your business as far as like social issues like this is when it becomes a problem. Like the government should have nothing to do
exactly.
with people's lives like that. Like for example, like I'm pro-choice. Why does the government have a ruling over what I can and can't do with my body and my birth control? Just like we shouldn't have a say in whether people want to go from man to women or women to man, whatever. You can do whatever you want as an adult. Just be an adult.
Exactly.
Be a consenting adult, and the government shouldn't be involved. In the same way, they shouldn't censor. This is America. Like we should not be censored, even if I say something totally false. Like it's my right to speak what I want to say.
Well, I think that I agree with you. I think that we're with these platforms and with the Elon Musks and other avenues of information, I think we're moving in a better place than we had been. I think prior with Twitter and how the all the things that were going on in Twitter, where they were spoon feeding us and taking stuff away, I think that we're finding more areas in which we can speak. And I look like podcast. Everybody's doing podcast. I mean, I should say, but I see podcasts all over on all different subjects. If you want to learn about something or have an area, it's there for you to learn about it. But I agree with you. When government gets involved, it just gets messy. And unfortunately, in the aggregate, democratic society, the Democrats, for the most part, want government involved because if they have people who are reliant upon them, it keeps them in power. And that's what they want. They want the power. And again, we can go off in a different tangent on this area, but it's just something that transcends even when we get to big pharma and about some of the things that went on with big pharma and how they control certain decisions. But it's interesting. I just wanted to get your take on that. There was one other area that I wanted to cover with you quickly, and I know I've spent a lot of time with you, and I really appreciate it. So you work your butt off. Obviously, you travel all over the place. You're educating yourself, and you said like you fill your cup with your jujitsu. Any trips or anything planned outside of that you're going to be doing? Anything exciting coming up?
Well, I'm going to Tel Aviv Pride.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I always travel. Like I'll do like international trips with my friends, and we'll go celebrate Pride because it's a big thing for us.
Okay,
so
when's that?
June 7th.
Have you gone before?
I've been to Tel Aviv before in the past, but not for Pride. I went to Israel because I was working in Ramallah 10 years ago at the Palestinian at the Palestinian medical complex. I was working in the ICU there. And so,
wow.
So I've been over there in that region of the world twice, but it's been like 10 years. So this time I'm going for fun. I'm going for Pride. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I would like to hear how that turns out. I'm sure you'll post that on social media,
You know
right?
it.
All right, great. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on. It was really very interesting. You shared a lot of good stuff for us.
Yes,
I really,
thank
really
you.
appreciate
It's
it.
a pleasure.
And if everybody who watched this or listened to us, please hit the like button and let us know in the comments section about any other topics you want us to cover. And remember, keep it pro to pro. That's all for today's episode of Pro to Pro. I hope you enjoyed hearing from our guest and gained some valuable insights into the world of entrepreneurship. Like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Thanks for watching and listening, and remember to keep it pro to pro.